expanding its income tax base to include remote workers and also leveraging digital solutions for enhanced revenue collection. This is outlined in the EKO Revenue Plus document ahead of the summit holding in September 2024. The plan aims to unlock 5 trillion naira in internally generated revenue from 4 key sectors, including the digital economy.
A new tax management system will be introduced to tap into the digital economy, focusing on remote workers, international companies, and online influencers. The plan is part of the Lagos New Money initiatives and aims to unlock an additional 2.73 trillion naira revenue stream. Joining us to discuss this is policy strategist and economist Rasaq Fatai. Good morning, Mr. Fatai. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
We'll also be joined this morning by content creator and public media consultant Franklyn Ikemefune. I believe he's here with us. Good morning, Mr. Ikemefune. All right, he'll be joining us shortly. All right, back to you, Mr. Fatai. When you heard about this new plan to tax influencers and to tax online remote workers, what came to your mind and how feasible a plan do you think this is?
Okay, so first let me say that we are currently experiencing a very challenging time in this country, a time where cost of living is very high, and as we've seen with the increasing agitation of citizens, people are quite agitated. And despite that, government has to, governance has to proceed. Like we need more resources to drive development. And in doing so, there have been various options on the table, whether to raise taxes for the corporates or to raise taxes for the individuals or to raise VAT and all of those. But I think this particular proposition from Lagos State is quite interesting because it's leveraging on the fact that we've seen, some growth in digital economy and tapping into that sector by expanding the tax base is what they are trying to do, right? So it's not a case of trying to increase taxes, but rather to expand the base, which I think it's a good move. And with what I've seen with the projection of about 200 billion taxes to be generated from 2 million people, I'm a bit worried with those numbers because when you actually look at why it's a good move, I'm a bit worried with those numbers because 2 million people in this particular sector might seem a bit exaggerated, right? Because when you even look at the entire size of Nigerian workforce, we're looking at about 50 to 70 million people, and more than half of that, into primary agricultural production activities. And then when you continue to scale down up to this digital economy, which it's not as big as it of an employer of labor compared to most traditional sector. Why? Although it's a very productive sector, people tend to earn relatively higher income than traditional sectors, but doesn't employ as much as we often think. And in fact, this is something that I can buttress based on studies I've done in the past. Trying to assess the digital sector, in Nigeria, where oftentimes you see them employing just a few people. But in the case of the influencers and all of that, we see these people. We know. We know those are quite successful, right? And I don't think they're in millions, right? So for me, I would say that it's a good move, but I think it can be a little bit ambitious with the projection of 2 million people to be taxed in this category and 200 billion revenue targets. Given that Lagos itself currently does just about a trillion naira in terms of revenue generation. So that 200 billion from that particular segment feels quite too optimistic. Then in terms of whether it's practical, I think Lagos has shown to being a state that can really do the impossible, right? We've seen how they've been able to really boost their high GR over the years. But I think for this particular segment, they might have a bit of challenge in the sense that it requires a bit of multilateral cooperation, right? If a tech guy who has a job, his employer is in the UK, you don't even know that employer, right? So it means that you need to leverage on data and collaboration with these countries where the employers are, to be able to ensure that you're accurately getting data to accurately, capture those who are benefiting from these opportunities. And the same for, most of these influencers, because the way they operate with most of these companies like YouTube and the rest is largely informal in some ways. So it can be very hard to, it to be very Aquilian to start doing the mapping, but this is not to say it's not possible. But and given that, Lagos has done a lot of, interesting stuff in the past, I would say that, I'm hopeful to see what they're able to do.
All right.
In that but it's definitely going to be very challenging to.
But like you've mentioned, 200 billion naira target is, quite ambitious. How do you think they can also navigate the aspects where, there's people who already pay personal income tax, and, the fears of double taxation for certain, of these individuals? How do you think the Lagos state government maybe is able to navigate that?
So, like I said, it will be anchored on data, right? Making sure that there's a proper data of who are those that are currently paying taxes, right? I know for some of the remote workers, their companies do in such a way that, they ask them to show their tax pay slip and all of those before they even get their income. They insist that some of them have to pay their taxes. However, we've seen several instances where people are not doing it. So I think it's really about trying to harmonize the existing, tax data, right? Trying to reconcile. And all of this is based on identity, right? So if you're able to identify someone as a unique identity to say, this person, is this person, right? This is tax ID number, and as paid tax, right? So if you have paid tax based on income you've declared, based on what they are saying coming into your bank account, there's no reason for you to pay tax in this new framework. So I think it's like I said, it's going to be a very challenging task, given that data systems and identity systems are quite fragmented. But it's Lagos, so it's not impossible for them to navigate this challenge. And I know that Lagos is also a state that tends to, drive some level of citizen engagement, and they are quite transparent in terms of, also publishing data on their affairs. So imagine that they will find a way around it.
Yeah, I don't expect that it would be very easy, but is it a justified move by the Lagos state government? There's people who would argue yes and no. There's also the angles where there are certain countries that are more welcoming to remote workers. Cyprus and Greece and some other cities like that have been mentioned that have even tax cuts for remote workers to at least to attract more remote workers to come over, and live in those places. But, Lagos is doing the, complete opposite. So there's that angle. But I want us to quickly bring in someone who's an influencer, is a content creator, Franklyn Ikemefune. Good morning and thanks for joining us.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great to have you join us. I'm sure you've also read through the report. Is this, welcoming for you? Are you excited about paying your taxes to Lagos state government as a content creator?
Yeah, I think, first of all, we need to look at it from the standpoint of the tax system is primarily promulgated upon the social contract. So I bring in my tax, and then there are incentives, there are perks that I have to get from paying my taxes. I think the major challenge has been issues of transparency. There seems to be a mistrust or a certain level of mistrust between the people and the government. It feels like a lot of energy is being exerted on the part of the government to ensure that the people hold up the end of the bargain. But when it comes to actually, when it comes to the government fulfilling their end of the bargain, then it leaves a lot to be desired. So I think that's primarily the problem. I don't think that paying the tax in itself is the challenge. I think it's the fact that it feels like it's only, the energy is not being reciprocated on the part of the government. I think that's the major challenge here.
Can you more specific. When you say the energy is not being reciprocated, what do you mean? And then also, is it common knowledge among other content creators that everybody pays their taxes? Do you also regularly pay your taxes to the Lagos State government?
Oh, yeah, yes, I do.
Based on your earnings?
Yes, I do. I pay to the LIRS. I have my
Okay.
identification.
And so is this a common concept among other content creators? Do they also have their LIRS relationship where they remit as they receive?
I can only speak for myself. I do not know what goes into the coffers of other content creators, but I know that I pay.
Mr. Fatai is laughing at you. Mr. Fatai, do you think otherwise?
No, I think he can only speak for himself, like he said.
Absolutely.
But it's a black hole. Like, you really don't know how big that space is and who is actually paying. And just like you said, the issue of social contract is an issue, but from a standpoint of fairness, I think it's okay for them to pay, right? Because there are people who don't even earn anything close to what most influencers earn, and their taxes are deducted from the source, right? So it would be unfair to those people, right, if they are paying taxes and there are some part of the population that are not doing so. So from a fairness standpoint, I think it's okay, right, that they pay that taxes so which means that the government is in the right direction. But I also think the government also has a lot to do, right, in making sure that these resources are well utilized, which is a major challenge in Nigeria today, where government gets taxes and what we see is most of it ends up being stolen, right? And people can't really see justify why they have to pay. And in fact, even for those who are paying, if they have their way, they would avoid the taxes.
Yeah,
So,
and that's the thing, that I want us to wrap up with, which is, has Lagos State also created itself as an environment that is favorable for content creators? I'm going to start with Mr. Franklyn. Quickly respond to that. Has Lagos State made, the content creator market, the remote work market, or made itself, favorable to the remote, work market, the content creator market, to justify? I mean, even if yes, you must pay your taxes regardless. But, you get the question, to justify its demand for taxes to be paid.
I do not think so. First of all, a lot of the remote workers that I know do not live in Lagos. So, sincerely, when I saw the numbers yesterday, I was taken aback, because I initially thought the 200 billion was the entirety of what they were trying to accrue across board, until I realized the 200 billion was solely from the remote workers and the content creators. And I was wondering where those numbers were going to come from, So I don't know a lot of remote workers who still live in Lagos. First off, you have to take into consideration the fact that the rent is absurd in Lagos. And then there's the issue of, having more people live in Lagos than the city itself geographically is able to contain, So I don't think that in that regard, you can say that there's a lot that people will miss if they run away as a result of not. I'm talking specifically for remote workers now.
Yes.
If they run away and go to other locations, right? As for the content creators, I guess it's only because Lagos seems to be the social hub or social capital, or provides the avenue for fanfare, as opposed to like in comparison to other locations in Nigeria. So I guess that's the only thing, But apart from that, I don't see how a lot of remote workers or content creators will not, if they are left with no other choice, I don't see how they won't leave Lagos.
Yeah. All right. All right. And just to wrap up quickly, Fatai, or Mr. Rasaq Fatai, what incentives do you think Lagos has to convince anybody who's a content creator here or a remote worker here to, immediately run to the LIRS and, pay their taxes?
Okay, so I would say that based on the status quo, it's not like much has been done to actually incentivize and hit that particular segment. But you could also see from as part of the strategy, they've also highlighted some of the things that they'll try to do, like having hubs to help grow more to drive the prospect of the digital economy. So which I believe that if the government is really being sincere about doing that, it should in some ways kind of complement the need for them to tax, this particular segment. And like Frank rightly mentioned, I think there might also be some challenges in the sense that because if Lagos is the only state implementing this, it means that people can now move from Lagos to Ibadan, right, to set up shop, or move from there to Ogun State, which is just very close to Lagos, and then they can avoid to pay the taxes. So I think for this to really be effective, the government has to fulfill their own bargain on the social contract, kind of making more investment to support stakeholders in this segment. But also, I think this is something that has to be replicated across all states.
All
right?
states, yeah.
And that's the only way to kind of ensure that it doesn't create some kind of distortions in the system.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it could be a case of an home goal for Lagos State.
Yeah. All right. But we'll see how things turn out. I'm guessing, in the next few days, we'll have someone from the Lagos State government join us to explain further, about, navigating around the double taxation aspect and also what the Lagos State government incentives are for, of course, encouraging more people to go to the LIRS and pay their taxes as content creators and remote workers. Thank you very much, Rasaq Fatai, for joining us, and Franklyn Ikemefune for your time. We'd love to speak with you again pretty soon.
It's a pleasure.
All right,
Thank you.
you.